Angry MGTOW here, and we are beginning to freak out researchers. Recently, medicalresearch.com, which is a highly accredited medical research website, probably one of the biggest in the world, that basically does medical research news and interviews. You can learn more from medical researchers published in major and specialty medical journals and healthcare meetings. Over 7,100 exclusive interviews, 50 news interviews each week. This is one of the biggest, if not the very biggest, medical research site on the net that features researchers actually providing interviews, writing in studies. Unbelievable. They are frightened of the MGTOW movement. So, you may remember about a month ago, I discussed ScienceDaily.com. Science Daily is a giant scientific website where, with numerous scientific studies and articles, you name it. They published an article or a bit of a study discussing the MGTOW movement and how it was damaging the relationship between men and women and had a direct correlation with the deterioration of marriages in the West. It's quite interesting that while the media, the mainstream media, does not want to talk about MGTOW, scientists, you heard me, are now freaking out. Now, you would say, okay, well, this is sociology, psychology, blah, blah, blah. Well, here's the thing. That's on a science website, Science Daily. I mean, they cover everything from topics on HIV to everything. But now medical researchers are targeting us. So now MGTOW is becoming a problem for even the medical community. You think I'm bullshitting you guys? I'll link you to medicalresearch.com so you can check out the site for yourself. There'll be a link to the site in the description, and also a link to the article that we're going to be discussing that was written by Nicholas H. Wolfinger PhD. Let's see if we can pull it up for you. There it is. Married men live longer, wealthier lives, and have more sex. So Dr. Wolfinger, okay, he's an adjunct professor at the University of Utah in the Department of Sociology, Professor, Department of Family and Consumer Studies. Interesting that he's within the Department of Family and Consumer Studies. Consumer Studies. Why that is so interesting is because keep in mind that back when I was studying psychology, there were numerous degrees that I can choose from. One of the degrees I could also choose from, instead of going into clinical psychology, was also business psychology. You're saying, huh? Yeah, you can get a PhD related to business psychology or economic psychology or corporate psychology. So what exactly do you do with such a degree? You're essentially studying people and how to, let's say, optimize productivity or the psychology of consumers. So for example, when you go into a Walmart, what gets people to spend more? How do you get people to work harder? What drives people? These types of things. Essentially, teaching companies how to manipulate people into make money, or how to manipulate people into spending money, looking at trends. People don't know this, that psychologists are exceptional at statistics. Very often, medical studies are reviewed by psychologists because they typically have more experience working with statistics than undoubtedly someone who graduates with a medical degree. Because medical degrees, you're focusing on medicine. You don't do a lot of research. Some people try to do research in medical school. Not everyone gets it in. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to psychologists, you do have to know how to use statistics. You have to do lots and lots of math. There's lots of math and statistics. Some people will there's lots of math and psychology, and some people will actually say, well, you can use software. You got to know your shit. I mean, I did so much research and learned all these research methods, and that was just with a master's in psych. Now, why this is significant regarding this doctor specifically, this PhD, is the fact that they are going after the MGTOW movement. Before we jump into the entire article, I'm going to show you an excerpt from it. Okay, let me jump to this. This is an excerpt, and he's talking about the reasons why he wrote the article. The second reason we wrote this research, so it wasn't just him, it was a group of researchers involved. The second reason we wrote this research brief is the rise of men going their own way. Movement. MGTOW. This is a group of men who have publicly renounced interest in marriage and in some cases relationships with women altogether. Some MGTOW adherents feel mistreated by women, others feel they have to cede too much freedom if they opt for marriage. MGTOWs have reported bitter custody disputes and being unfairly deprived access to their children. Given their publicly strident views of marriage, they have clashed publicly with my collaborator, Bradford Wilcox. Our research brief is our response to MGTOW. So, I don't know the entire history between the clash with Bradford Wilcox, but clearly, you can see that there is a lot of things happening right now. There are a lot of people who are completely taken back by the MGTOW movement. Bradford Wilcox, just doing a quick Google search, he actually has a Wikipedia. He's an associate professor of sociology and director of the National Marriage Project at the University of Virginia. And if we actually look into him a little bit further, this actually happened in May of 2016. Brad Wilcox fires back at MGTOW. And basically, here's this thing. Okay, a lot of you may remember that the lovely sarcasm alert video from Prager University by a 1W Bradford Wilcox. Basically, the message of the video was that men need to grow up and get married. So he was associated with PragerU because it is really good for you. Needless to say, the video engendered some unfavorable comments about his position, including turd-flinging monkey's response. So I recall that there was an article published on, I think, The Economist, actually. Now, Wilcox has recently authored an article in response to the comments he received. Hopefully the link works. So I do recall this, and it basically starts off, never in my wildest dream did I imagine I'd earn the ire of a character named Turd-Flinging Monkey, the nom de plume of a popular online men's rights activist, a leader in the MGTOW, men going their own way movement, which encourages men to avoid romantic relationships with women. Monkey, he refers to as Monkey. Monkey did not take kindly to my new Prager University video talking of the benefits of marriage for men. In the video, I noted, among other things, that married men work harder, about 400 more hours, smarter, they're less likely to quit without having found another job, and more successfully. They make about $60,000 more per year than their single peers. I describe these as features, not bugs, of married life for men. In response, in a video of his own, Monkey uploaded on marriage, arguing that the things I had described as features of marriage were, in fact, bugs. For men, marriage equals slavery. Marriage, in essence, is a man choosing his slave master. I love you, turd. I love you, monkey. For men, marriage equals unrequited sacrifice. So married men work 400 more hours per year than single men. That's not a good thing. They're not hanging out with their friends. They're sacrificing their life for other people. Now, you may think that's noble, but that's not a benefit for the man. For men, marriage equals emasculation. It means giving a woman power over your life. These are things that Turd basically said in response to Wilcox. power over your income, and all above. For men, marriage equals a soul-destroying divorce. Talk to the men in MGTOW who have had their wallets ripped out of their ass in family court. Go to the graves of men who killed themselves after they were unemployed and couldn't afford child support and faced jail. Talk to those men about how wonderful marriage was. Ask them about the hundreds of hours they work extra each year to avoid going to prison because they owe so much child support or alimony that they gotta move in with their parents. Oh, Monkey, I love you. I love you, Monkey. This is Turd Flicking Monkey's view of marriage. Okay, so I'm not going to read any more from this guy for at least right now. Let's jump back into this. So, as you can see on the screen, that's what he was referencing. Basically, so there was a clash with Bradford Wilcox, and as a response, now medical researchers are jumping into this because they are freaking out. And I talked about this before. I've explained that eventually they would come after us. I made a video discussing first they laugh at you, then how does it go? First they laugh at you. Let me see. Let me get the exact words. First they laugh at you. It goes first they ignore you. So first they ignored us as MGTOW. They didn't take us seriously. They thought we were joking around. They thought we were lonely, pathetic losers. Okay? Then they laughed at us. They said we were losers. We are just a group of lonely, pathetic men. Then they're starting to fight with us, argue with us. And these are shots that are being fired from huge groups. Science Daily, PragerU. I mean, they're kind of a joke. But, medicalresearch.com. We are earning the air of a number of these giant researchers in the U.S. And this is going to only get bigger. At some point, they're going to be talking about MGTOW on the media. They're going to undoubtedly bring up MGTOW on Fox News. And here's the funny thing about that. Once that door is opened, once Donald Trump starts cutting benefits and women start looking for men, especially as they're getting older now and they're going to start, their eggs, they're realizing, oh shit, 35 is coming and I haven't found the man yet. As more women are now hitting the wall, they are going to start running to get men in the next couple of years. And as this happens, they are going to start pointing fingers at the MGTOW movement. And the medical researchers, they love this in a way because they can now use this. This is feminism has, pretty much gone as far as it possibly can. So now, as we're seeing a reversal, they'll blame us, they'll attack us, but it doesn't even matter. Because of the anonymity of MGTOW and the fact that you can't lock us down. What, you're going to try to socially shame us? First off, that's one of the reasons why we remain anonymous. And no matter what, there's always going to be more MGTOW popping up. And even if someone doesn't admit to being a MGTOW, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. Because it's about the lifestyle. There are many more men that live the MGTOW lifestyle that don't even identify as MGTOW or don't even know what the hell it is. And there are an increasing number of young men that are discovering MGTOW and choosing to go down the MGTOW path. Let's go ahead and go into the article further. The actual article published on medicalresearch.com from Nicholas H. Wolfinger. So let's go ahead and jump further into his article. And while I don't really care much about what he has to say, let's go ahead and look at what he's actually advocating. So like I said, it was a response to Bradford Wilcox. And he said, I've been studying marriage and divorce for 15 years. Last year we published Soulmates, Religion, Sex, Love, and Marriage Among African Americans and Latinos, Oxford University Press. This was published within Oxford University, guys. Oxford University. So this is not a joke. This is not a game. One of the most prestigious universities in the world. We're always looking for opportunities to present our findings to the publics. So Valentine's Day is a great excuse. I want to say very quickly, guys, before I continue, it's interesting because guys like him, why do you think they're going to attack men like us? Because at one point, it's also, if men increasingly are walking away from marriage, you would think, well, then it's more pickings for these guys. That's incorrect. Because if more men start saying marriage is a landmine, then it makes it even more socially unacceptable to get married. For example, if more men are saying avoid marriage, then being married will eventually become social stigma. It will become something that is deemed socially unacceptable by men if men won't engage in it in large numbers. This puts men like Dr. Nicholas Wolfinger, who preaches about the wonders of marriage, at risk, because now he's on his own. And when he gets screwed over in divorce court, he'll have no one but to blame. See, here's the thing about misery. Misery loves company. And men want other men to suffer. Why do you think guys who are in miserable relationships will still turn around and tell other men, how wonderful it is? Then even though they're headed home to wash the dishes, take care of the kids, while their cheating wives are out banging the gardeners or the neighbors, or essentially just telling them, hey, listen, we're in an open relationship now. I'm going to fuck who I want, and there's nothing you can do about it. But let's go ahead and jump into the article further. Let's jump on in. He says, it's probably too strong a statement to call our new research brief a study, as we're not offering any novel findings. Instead, we're just compiling data from different sources. So he refers to this as a research brief. Doesn't refer to it as a study, because a study would actually mean that you're actually conducting additional information. So basically, they're just looking at current statistics. Instead, we're just compiling data from different sources, some published by other scholars, some based on our own analysis of national data. So they have been analyzing this data to reaffirm a basic point. Marriage is good for men in myriad ways. Marriage is also good for women, but they await their own research brief. In particular, marriage offers these benefits to men. Notice how interesting it is. Women are awaiting their own brief. So they don't actually want to talk about why marriage is good for women. They're focusing more on why marriage is good for men. In other words, why slavery is good for men. And also, they don't want to offend women because they have to tailor it specifically to a woman's needs, so it won't be too offensive, and even then they can backtrack if needs be. In particular, marriage offers these benefits to men. Higher earnings, greater assets, and more job stability. Married men make about $16,000 a year more than their single peers with otherwise similar backgrounds. So they're basically just repeating the same crap that Brad Wilcox discussed and Turd refuted. They make about $16,000 more per year. Here's what's interesting. Married men make about $16,000 a year more than their single peers, but how much of that income is actually disposable for men? Because if they're married, then they're also going to be spending money on their wives, their houses, potentially their children as well. $16,000 a year more essentially means that these men are working longer hours to pay for more mouths, to pay for more children, to pay for their wives that are going to be buying endless amounts of crap. So even though they may make $16,000 more per year, they undoubtedly, more than likely, have a lot less disposable income than single men making far less. So let's say a single man makes $45,000 a year, while a married man is making $61,000 a year. Let's not forget that from that $61,000 a year, he is going to have to spend money for his children's education, for their food, for their needs, for all of this stuff, for their housing and living expenses. So if he's married, he may actually own a home, or he's trying to buy a home. Let's say he owns a home. A considerable amount of that income is going to be going towards the mortgage, also paying for the children's needs, and again for his wife. This is going to eat into his income substantially, leaving him with very little disposable income. Single men, on the other hand, are less likely to actually purchase a home. Some will, but many won't. And even those that do, they'll still have more flexibility of how they carry their homes. They might rent out a part of their home because they're able to, or they'll still have more disposable income because they're not spending it on children or a wife. Some people will turn around and argue that, well, if you're living with shared resources, you're living in a house, you're sharing resources. The wife might also work. So let's say she makes also $60,000 or $40,000 a year. Let's say she makes $40,000 a year, working part-time or full-time, whatever. That's $100,000 a year. That's a lot better than that's $101,000 a year. So that's still a lot better than a single man making $45,000 a year. Yet again, if a woman is going out to work, she has to have a car. She also has to have clothing. So basically, all the money that she's earning, she's also spending money so that she can go to work. It's interesting, isn't it? Better sex lives compared to both single and cohabitating men. According to the data from the National Health and Social Life Survey, 51% of married men report they are extremely emotionally satisfied with sex compared to 39% of cohabitating men and 36% of single men. This is something interesting that Wilcox seemed to have left out when he quoted this exact same study. The fact that they are extremely emotionally satisfied. He basically said they are extremely satisfied with sex. Notice the word emotionally satisfied. So for example, the survey didn't ask if they were emotionally satisfied or physically satisfied. Emotionally and physically satisfied are two very different things. Don't forget that women are more emotional than men, while men are more physical than women. In other words, we're more visual than women, and the way that men experience sex is different than women. Men need sex as much as more for, men associate sex more with a release than women do. Don't get me wrong, women enjoy sex as it provides a release that's both physical and emotional, but for men, it's often more physical and then emotional. That's the reason why men can actively sleep with prostitutes and still find comfort and enjoyment in that activity, while women may not feel the same way, especially paying to sleep with a male prostitute, although it is happening more and more around the world. So it's interesting, they said emotionally satisfied, extremely emotionally satisfied. Yeah, that doesn't equate to physically satisfied, compared with 39% of cohabitating men and 36% of single men. So single men and men who are cohabitating men and single men. So men living with a woman and men who are just plain out single. Well, here's the thing that you can consider about those things, these factors. If you're a single man, you're more likely to be having disposable sex. So you're not going to be in long-term sustained relationships that are in the same sense that married couples would be in. Also, what's interesting about that survey is it's about half of these men are extremely satisfied emotionally. So that suggests that half of them are not extremely emotionally satisfied. That's interesting, huh? Longer and happier lives. Men who get and stay married live almost 10 years longer than their unmarried peers. Also, young married men are about twice as happy. 46% of married men report they are very happy with life, compared to 20% of single men and 24% of cohabitating men. Now, here's where I'm really worried about this. Typically, married men tend to be a bit older. This is where I'm looking at the survey and questioning a lot of this, because, okay, the men who are being surveyed, they may be a bit older that are married, versus younger men who are choosing not to get married. So the older men who are currently married, more than likely they're going to say that they're happier in life, but don't forget that these are men who also have established their careers. So they've established their careers, and they've also taken care of a number of things in their lives that that typically younger men may not have. So, for example, when you're in your 20s, you're kind of broke sometimes. You can be really broke. It can be a difficult time when you're still finding yourself and adjusting to life. We tend to get happier and become more content as we get older, and our income tends to increase and rise as we get older, for example. So if you surveyed a 25-year-old doctor, who's just entering residency right now, versus a 40-year-old doctor who has long completed his residency and is making well over $200,000 a year, undoubtedly there's probably going to be a higher level of happiness among the doctor who's working fewer hours, more established in his field, making more money, and his life is more stable. He's found what he wants to do. He's enjoying himself. He's basically settled into his life. Young men, on the other hand, are different. So I'm questioning this a bit. Because again, it says young married men are about twice as happy. 43% of married men report that they are very happy. 43% of married men. So again, it does not actually say young men in that sense. The way that this thing is written, you have to look at the wording very carefully, because they're really dancing around young men versus married men, which could include a broader demographic of men who are older men. And okay, so compared to 20% of single men and 24% of cohabitating men. All right. So let's go ahead and look at the responses again. He said that there are two reasons for making this, writing this brief, research brief. The first is what's been called the retreat from marriage. The fact that Americans will spend less of their adult lives in a marriage than they have in years gone by. Although the divorce rate is at a 35-year low, it's still high by historical standards. Also, Americans are waiting longer to get married than ever before. For these reasons, the percentage of Americans who are married at any given point in time has declined a lot in recent years. Now, here's the interesting thing. While divorce rates are at a 35-year low, they're still high. But what if the reasons why divorce is lower than it has been in recent years is because there's a saying these days that it's cheaper to keep her. This means that men who are in unhappy relationships are going to be less likely to initiate a divorce because they are more likely to have their lives ripped apart in divorce courts. There's a lot less incentive for a man to get a divorce than a woman. So in reality, divorce rates among women could be rising while divorce rates among men are decreasing because men realize that they have no incentive to get a divorce. They get a divorce, they're basically just triggering the apocalypse for themselves. That's an interesting thing. So they're not looking at divorce rates between men and women. They're basically compiling that into one. So in other words, women initiating divorces could be on the uptick, while men initiating divorces could be on the downtick. Especially because men realize getting a divorce leads to tons of social ramifications for them. It's a lot cheaper to keep her. The article goes on to say, also, Americans are waiting longer to get married than ever before. For these reasons, the percentage of Americans who are married at any given time has declined in recent years. At the same time, we shouldn't pronounce marriage to be dead and buried. The overwhelming percentage of Americans still want to get married, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% will do sometimes in their lives. Funny, you're saying 85% of people will get married, although you're also suggesting that a lot of them will end up getting divorced. And furthermore, you're writing an article about MGTOW, referencing MGTOW, because that's actually the very next reason which we read earlier, which suggests that there is serious concerns that MGTOW is resulting in men choosing to actually not get married. Think about that very carefully. Despite the fact that they suggest 85% will eventually get married, there's actually studies that have found that millennials within our lifespan, which is over the course of our lives, will typically not get married. More will not get married. A significant number of millennials will not get married compared to previous generations. And that's just a fact. And that is actually going to be higher among millennial men. So more millennial men are going to choose to remain single than millennial women. Interesting. Which also suggests that a lot of millennial women who do find someone to marry them will likely be marrying men who are older than them. Which is something that a boomer pointed out to me, a young Xer or boomer pointed out, that as shit hits the fan, these women are going to run out and try to get into relationships with 50-year-old men. So 35-year-old women are going to try to get into a relationship with a 50-year-old man, and these 50-year-old men aren't going to want to have anything to do with them. They're not even going to speak to them. So they're basically going to make a run for resources. It's going to be hilarious watching this. Younger women who have hit the wall trying to court older men who are beginning to gray and bald. I'm not gonna reread the whole thing, but again, he said the second reason we wrote this research brief is the rise of men going their own way, MGTOW, the movement, which is a social group of men who have publicly renounced interest in marriage, and in some cases relationships with women altogether. Now, he says, what should readers take away from your report? Well, marriage is good for men, but that's only part of the story. Obviously, there are some men who aren't good candidates for matrimony. Nor is marriage a panacea? I don't know. Americans who are already struggling financially, for instance, won't automatically be lifted out of poverty by acquiring a spouse. Marriage is often beneficial to men's bank balances and their overall well-being, but structural reforms to our labor market and welfare state would do wonders to support healthy marriages. Structural reforms to our labor market and welfare state. So what exactly are they suggesting? That women and families, married men, should essentially be given more support to help support? This is an interesting thing. So it may suggest that they're looking at ways to incentivize marriage. In other words, well, if you get married, you get to keep more of your money. This is suggesting the potential of a man tax. See, this is how you got to learn how to read between the lines, guys. What they're talking about is a man tax. So in other words, men who aren't married will have to pay more, while men who are married will pay less. Because it's good for men, it's good for society. It's good for everyone. Don't worry about it. Structural reforms to our labor market, in other words, pay women more for the time that they don't work. Very simple. These guys are tricky, aren't they? They're sneaky, but once you've been playing this game for a while, you just start seeing the bullshit left and right. Okay, what recommendations do you have for future research as a result of this study? Now, this is very interesting. Obviously, women merit their own research brief. Linda Waite and Maggie Gallagher landmark 2000 book, The Case for Marriage, Why Married People Are Happier, Healthier, and Better Off, and many other studies have shown strong benefits of marriage for men and women alike. Much less is known about same-sex couples, given the relative recent advent of marriage equality. Also, under 2% of the population is homosexual, and of course many gays and lesbians aren't married. This all makes collecting representative samples of same-sex marriages more difficult accordingly, and more research is needed. Less than 2% of the population are homosexual. Very interesting. Less than 2% of the population are homosexual. identify as homosexuals, and even though the numbers are increasing, this was published on February 21st, 2017. So if the statistics that he's using are up to date, less than 2% of the population are homosexual. I could have sworn it was like right around 1% or less than 1%. But anyway, less than 2% of the population are homosexual. Less than 2%. 2%. So this really talks about the fact that despite all the media coverage, the attacks on men, the bullshit, despite all of it, women need men. Society needs people to have babies. There are not enough people going gay. Despite gender fluidity, non-binary, there's not enough people choosing to have sustainable relationships with the opposite gender, to even put core focus on homosexual relationships as being a norm in society that will actually help society, when homosexual people only make up 2% of the population. It's not saying we should discriminate against them, but 2% of the population will do very little to grow the population, especially when you have to consider the fact that if they choose to have children, more than likely it's going to happen through the use of adoption or the donation of sperm and the use of one of their eggs, or the use of sperm and the donation of an egg. Again, and that's a very costly process at times as well that would occur through in vitro fertilization. Yes, there is medical research showing that men and men, that single-sex couples can potentially have children one day using skin cells. However, that's likely not going to happen anytime soon, probably at least for another 10 years, maybe 20 years or more before something like that actually becomes the absolute norm. Could be sooner than that. But again, I doubt it's going to happen next year. I mean, when I looked into it recently, the researchers said that they were years away from actually perfecting it. They were still experimenting on only animals, I believe. He goes on to say, okay, so this all makes collecting research samples of same-sex marriages more difficult. Accordingly, more research is needed. Finally, I'd welcome more progress on the holy grail of research on the benefits of marriage, the question of sample selection. Does marriage itself produce benefits for health, happiness, and finance, or is it just that healthier, happier, and wealthy men are most likely to get married? Now that's another interesting concept. I'm impressed that he even brought that up, because here's the interesting thing. Guys like Donald Trump have been married multiple times. They're able to get married multiple times because they have the resources to do so. So they have the resources to fuck up in divorce court and still keep dragging along. Why do you see celebrities getting married multiple times? Because they don't learn their lesson the first time. And they'll keep getting married because they have money coming in. So they'll say, well, I'll just do it again. Oh, well, I can still afford to eat. Unless they get screwed over really bad, they don't learn. And even many of those who do get screwed pretty bad, Johnny Depp, still don't necessarily learn their lesson. Well, we're still waiting to see what happens with Johnny. It's clear that both are true to a certain extent, the researcher says, regarding, this is interesting. It's true that both are true to a certain extent, regarding does marriage itself produce benefits of health, happiness, and finance, or is it just that healthier, happier, and wealthy men are most likely to get married? So again, he is suggesting that it's true to a certain extent. It's clear that both are true. So it is true that healthier, happier, and wealthy men are more likely to get married. Obviously, W. Bradford Wilcox and I think that marriage does produce direct benefits for men and women. Nevertheless, new research approaches that offer greater traction on this question would be welcome. So yeah. So again, I'm going to link you guys directly to the article. You can look at it. There's also a chart that you guys can check out. which shows marriage trends by race, ethnicity, adults aged 20 through 54, which I talked about. So it's kind of frightening that they include the chart in there, which shows all these different age demographics, and then they were talking about young married men versus single men versus married. Again, they never said specifically that they were all talking about young men. This is where bullshit occurs. So again, age demographics have to be taken into consideration on that happiness survey. And furthermore, there's also the other point. There's also the other point that, men are more emotionally satisfied. Yeah, emotionally, not physically. I'm looking at a comment that someone actually left on the article on February 26th, because it's published on February 21st. And let's read the comment. In order to see if married men really do live longer than unmarried men, it would be necessary to compare married men to never married men. The problem with the usual married men live longer is that divorced men get thrown right back into the single pot. Wow, holy cow. Okay, guys, so this is where someone actually disputes this. This is a really good point. In order to see if married men really do live longer than unmarried men, it would be necessary to compare married men to never married men. Never married men. The problem with the usual married men live longer is that divorced men get thrown right back into the single pot. So, for example, you're a married man who has had your life destroyed in the courts, all of this, torn apart, and then you get divorced. Now you're considered a single man. So let's say you're actually one of the men that's actually bringing down the life expectancy for single men, because you were married and your life got destroyed. So now that's actually bringing down your happiness. That's bringing down your wealth. That's bringing down a lot of other factors. And that's another thing that we should consider. Because they say that married men will tend to make, let's say, $16,000 more per year than single men. But if you have your life torn apart, a lot of these men end up losing their jobs. They end up going to prison. A lot of these things happen as well, which inhibits their ability to make money. This is very interesting. We should be comparing never married men versus married men, not single men versus married men. That's a very, very important point. And this guy goes on to say married men may make more money, but they also need more, simply because married men are more likely to be living with children, which costs money. Simply put, a single guy with no wife and no kids can live on a lot less, which is a point I made earlier in the article. So, guys, I want to know what you think. Do you find it interesting that these researchers are starting to come after us, MGTOW? They're starting to call us out by our name? I mean, because honestly, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to take a stand. Everybody, just grab my hand. Being a MGTOW it's a great thing. We gain freedom, we gain self-respect, something that we lost due to being damaged in a feminist, gynocentric society. And I honestly think that guys like Nicholas H. Wolfinger, they're just doing damage to men. They're spreading propaganda. Their research methods are not good because they're using biased research that can easily be manipulated. It's not looking at an entire picture. This is very, very bad research. Very, very bad research, I'll be honest. And it's funny how he propagates this type of crap. And I'm going to call it crap because that's what it is. This is absolute junk. This is absolute junk. In reality, if you were to actually control for the variables such as married men versus, or the constructs such as married men versus unmarried men versus men who've never been married and are single, I think that things might change substantially. So I hope that that's something that Dr. Nicholas Wolfinger actually takes into consideration at some point. And when it comes to Bradford Wilcox, well, you know, some people never change. And I think TFM did a great job of, tearing him apart and using logic and reason and rationality to show the reasons why his argument was complete garbage, like I have done with Nicholas H. Wolfinger. And I want to know what you guys think in the comments. If, what other reasons do you think marriage is destructive, and what other points do you think you can find that would rip apart the argument made by Nicholas H. Wolfinger PhD? Bro, you think just because you have a PhD, you know what you're doing? No. So let me know what you guys think, and just remember that I make at least 3 of these videos every single day, plus bonus videos. So please consider becoming a patron by heading over to my YouTube homepage, clicking on the Patreon link in the header, or you can also find a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. When you become a Patreon, you can become a Patreon for as little as $5 a month. This helps to ensure that I continue to put out quality content for you guys. I can't do it without you, so please sign up for Patreon and become a patron, so that I can continue to make quality content. And there's all these great rewards for at different levels, 5, 10, 30, whatever you can afford. There's something on there for you. And again, you get access to bonus videos, monthly hangouts, one-on-one Skype calls, tons of great stuff. So definitely check that out, please, and help support my channel, because I can't do it without you. Also, enable notifications by clicking on the notification button below any of my videos. That's next to the subscribe button. You'll see a pop-up that says, send me all notifications for this channel. Check the box, hit save, and when you do this, you will always receive a notification whenever I'm live streaming or put out a new video. And if you've already done it, you don't have to do it again. This will also get you around that nasty unsubscriber bug that's been going around YouTube. So even if you get accidentally unsubscribed from my channel, you will still continue to get notifications whenever I live stream or put out content. Let me know what you think in the comment section. If you agree that this study saying married men will live longer, wealthier lives and have more sex is absolute crap. It's a poorly done piece of jargon by Dr. Nicholas Wolfinger. I should just call you Nick. I should just call him Nick. I don't think he deserves to be called Doctor. So I'm going to call him Nick. Alright, Nick? Maybe I'll call him Nicky. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MGTOW or death. And cheers. That was a damn good cheers.